Yep.
Hey guys, we're back at PAX East 2018. We're looking at Outpost of the game with Dan and Will, and their person who's on the computer who's not Mike because he's not important enough to be Mike. Clearly, he's going to be their driver. But I want to talk about introduce yourselves because you're also a streamer, Will. You talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my name is Will. I also go by Cabby. I'm a partnered streamer on Mixer. I play a lot of PUBG, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. And partnered with them as well. But I stream as a way to tie in game development along with popular games and kind of unifying that push of streaming plus development.
And Dan, tell us your name and tell us.
And my name's Dan. I run the company basically. We're Symmetric Games, and we make Outpost Zero.
So talk about what is Outpost Zero? What kind of game is this?
So Outpost Zero is, the premise is that you play as a robotic overseer sent to an alien planet to mine the natural resources there and develop a colony. And unlike a typical survival experience where the kind of early game hump of just surviving in the world is challenging and then it kind of drops off a bit, we've blended elements of simulation gameplay into the mix. So you don't just build a base, you actually develop an entire robotic workforce that you send out to mine resources, bring them back, and help you upgrade all your stuff.
So it kind of sounds like survival meets first person meets RTS.
Exactly, yeah. We're trying to give players, fans of the survival genre, a deeper experience where they can start off with unfamiliar territory, but then actually learn a lot more about the intricate systems of building your base and developing those resources.
So like an RTS, do you have tiers of things you build in a certain order, or kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's you start off with building kind of level 1, tier 1 structures, and all of that's stuff that you can kind of do by yourself. But then once it comes time to upgrade things to tier 2, it's exponentially more difficult than doing it in tier 1. And a typical survival game, what that would mean is a grind, right? Like you would be chopping down trees for hours, trying to get enough to upgrade your stuff to level 2. What we're doing is we're actually creating just a system where instead of you personally grinding, you develop a workforce that does that manual labor for you. So you can see some of the drones here that you can give commands to and tell them what to do, and they'll do things like mine specific resources that you want, craft things for you, upgrade your structures, and that's kind of how you progress in the game, is developing this robotic workforce, see to their needs, upgrade them, give them better gear, and make sure that they're all commanded to do all the things that you need to do to improve.
Now, I'm noticing right now, like he's healing structures.
Yeah.
Now, that means that there's probably enemies in the game that want to eat your structure.
Yeah. Well, there's this is not, the world's named Gaia, but it's far from that. It's not a very friendly place. Nothing on this planet wants you there, including the planet itself. So, there's plenty of animals that will ruin your day, and also just the environment itself. We have all kinds of events that happen, from sandstorms to acid rain, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and all of these will wreak havoc on your base in different ways. So you have to build your base in such a way that it can withstand different events. And then ultimately, if you're able to do that, you still have to withstand the pirate raids that come after you. So the higher level base, the more profitable that you are, you'll climb the leaderboards on the server, but at the same time, you'll be a juicier target for these pirates to invade you.
Now, is it a single player game, or are there all multiple people in this world?
So it is PvP, dedicated server, online multiplayer. We'll host dedicated servers. We also want to empower people to play PvE if they want to. So if you want to play co-op with your friends, we'll let you run PvE servers on your own, and you can just play and pit yourself against the pirates and set their difficulty really high and see how long you can last.
Oh, that's great. It's kind of like a horde mode, but in your own unique
Basically,
twist on it.
Yeah. And in the future, we want to add a lot more game modes. It's mostly focused on sandbox, kind of endlessly scaling gameplay right now. But in the future, we want to add more competitive game modes, like a base assault mode where one team is on offense and another team's on defense, and you're kind of building a base around a defense, a structure that you need to defend. Maybe another mode might be launch to the sky, so the first person on the server to build a satellite and launch it up into space wins. So that's stuff that we're kind of looking forward to in the future.
So what is it about games, or especially survival games, that make them so interesting for other players to watch?
In terms of like games like survival games, get that pacing that people love to see, and the big thing is that they're kind of on this journey with the player in terms of surviving. They want to know how long and how far can he or she go without dying, or what are his tips and tricks in terms of like what they do and build differently creatively, because sandbox are intrinsically more creative in nature. So you see a lot of people do like wide bases or really tall bases, or they'll stack up on certain types of resources for whatever reason. Outpost Zero is perfect for that type of setting, because there's always something breaking up the dynamism of progression. Because you go from the traditional settings of survival where you're hacking trees and things like that to building these industrial-sized bases where robots are doing all of this for you. They all have their personalities, so you may see the streamer or player go to one robot and they develop this relationship with the robot because there's a morale system in the game. So all this comes around, makes it a great way for viewers to kind of root for their favorite streamers and such like that.
What kind of games did you guys draw inspiration from when you were in the development stage of this concept?
So definitely a mix of different titles. So stuff like Ark, obviously, and Rust, kind of classic survival games. But we also drew a lot of inspiration from some more really hardcore simulation games, things like Factorio, things like RimWorld, or Dwarf Fortress even. Things that really allow you to get really deep into developing these massive groups of minions that you have to keep happy, and the increasing complexity of having to manage all of that stuff at once.
So like a lot of things that turn me off about survival games, because you mentioned Ark, is just their interface is a mess, and it's just very intimidating, and I never got into it because of that. But you're just looking at the game now, your interface is nice and clean and smooth and clear cut, and I'm not intimidated by it at all. I'm like, oh, I kill this, it opens up a sub menu, I grab that, and then I've even seen him crafting some things. I'm like, this looks very straightforward.
Yeah. So survival games can be like really like complex because of that. There's a lot of systems, and sometimes UI isn't as important to a lot of games because they'll just cram everything in. For us, we want that sci-fi clean aesthetic look, and we do that through the art to tie and unify the entire interface to make it feel like an actual robot interface because you play as one.
Yeah, and we definitely also that was one of our goals when we started developing this game, is that we wanted to take the survival genre and we wanted to accomplish three things. One, we wanted to make it more friendly to a new player to the genre. We don't expect you to know 100% how to play survival games. We have a full tutorial. We want to make everything as intuitive as possible. We don't want the early game to be as punishing because we have confidence in our mid and late game, which is kind of part two of this thing, right? Is that we want to give players something to do in the mid and late game. We don't want it to all drop off. We don't want to essentially spend all of our time making the early game challenging and then have everything drop off later. And then finally, we want to establish that good pacing of gameplay so that you don't feel like you're always just grinding. You want to feel like you're doing some meaningful things along the way.
It's funny you mentioned that you wanted to feel like a robot interface, because now that you mentioned it, I look at it, I'm like, that does look like something RoboCop would see in his HUD as he was walking around Detroit, doing that stuff. It is very, very angular and very specific and looks really nice.
Yeah, and the interface actually ties into the gameplay as well. Like if you notice the bottom left, there's an energy bar. Gone are the days of like food and water, and in our game everything's about energy. Energy management and production is crucial to progression and survival here. Everything you do requires energy. For example, Jack is sprinting right now, and he's got energy being drained just from sprinting because it takes a lot more energy. Now if he uses his compass and his map and looks for resources around him, this is a great tool for the player because they don't have to aimlessly hunt for resources.
Right,
they can check on their
absolutely,
map.
yeah.
But what does it take? It takes more energy.
It's funny because resource management and interface in a game like this are like crucial. And I think people undervalue the work that goes into a UI.
Yeah.
What I mean? Like, it's a huge thing. How big are the tooltips? Are they too big? Are they too small? Is this color too dark? Is this color too light?
Yeah.
So just like, how did you guys make it so it was really nice and clean?
So we have a great UI artist on our team, and he spent a ton of time developing the look and feel of it. And we really iterate a lot on the UX. I mean, we have a long way to go. We don't think it's even done. Like, we look at the game, and I look at the game, and all I see is like, man, we really need to make this better, and we really need to make this better. We are putting as much effort as we can into making everything feel cohesive and come together. So we definitely wanted that to be a focus, making things easy and intuitive and easy to learn, basically.
Another thing about the interface I have to say again is that when he's going through inventory and he switches, it like does this like kind of loading blur thing.
Yeah.
It's just like small things like that I can really appreciate from a game design
Feels like
standpoint.
an electronic stutter.
Yeah, right, because he's going through stuff.
Right. Those are the little touches that we want that kind of give it that AAA polish, for such a small indie game.
And it's really important for a game like ours, where it does get pretty complicated down the road with learning how all the different systems work together, for our interface to not get in the way of that. We want to make sure that the interface is something that will always be intuitive for a player, and then the real challenge for a player really comes with learning how the systems work together.
So talk about, I saw some weapons early in the game. Talk about like some of the different weapons you have in the game.
So we have a bunch of different weapons, tools, from anything from melee weapons that help you harvest things faster, or that you can use without really worrying about ammunition, all the way up to various different types of guns. The way the weapons work in our game is that you can kind of create different tiers of weapons, and the weapons will have different stats on them. So if you create a tier 1 weapon, it might only have 1 bonus stat, but a tier 3 weapon will have 3 bonus stats. But the benefit of those stats highly depends on how high your crafting skill is. So what you're going to really want to do is find one robot that actually has really high crafting skill, natural crafting skill. Give them a lot of crafting items and make that person into their weaponsmith, as it were, and have that robot be the one who's creating all your high-level weapons so that you can get the best possible stats when you create those new weapons.
So these robots, they're not just like gathering X resource. They're doing everything that you don't have to tediously do yourself.
Exactly.
When you're offline, who takes care of your base? The robots do.
The robots.
They'll gather, and they're trained specifically to come back and replenish your furnace to keep the base powered, and to continually patrol and repair walls and things like that, because we do have structural degradation and weather events. They still keep going during in a dedicated server setting.
So how do you mentioned energy is your resource because it's no more stamina or hunger meter. So how does that replenish? How do you get it replenished?
So if you're just exploring out in the world, you can find these yellow rocks out there that we call energy rocks that you can use to quickly do a quick charge of yourself so you don't die. But what you would also do is build a base and create power generators and build charging stations. And that's where you would recharge your energy when you're back home. Your bots will also use this. So you're going to want to create plenty of power generation, plenty of batteries, so that when your bots are coming in from the field, if you all need to charge at the same time, you're not all competing over the same power. So it really becomes a thing where you really have to understand how the system works and build redundancies and build up and upgrade so that you can withstand any sort of things that might happen to your base.
You mentioned before how you're trying to make the game very approachable, and in survival games, some of them are pretty difficult. Rust, for example, is not an easy to pick up and play game, you know what I mean? Stranded Deep, not easy to pick up and play. Talk about some of the things you're doing to make that happen in your game, make it actually approachable and easy to learn.
Yeah, so we have a full tutorial system. Ultimately, what we really want to do is build a full campaign that will function as a tutorial. Not the tutorial system right now, it's basically a sandbox tutorial. It teaches you the basics of how to interact with the game. But ultimately what we want to do is do a more full-fledged tutorial that doesn't just teach you that, but it teaches you proper building techniques, good, efficient ways to lay out your base, different ways that you might want to assault an enemy base. And these are all types of things that we can do with specific scenarios in our campaign to basically remix the mechanics that we have, the basic survival mechanics that we have, into interesting challenges that not only are fun and hard to play, but also teach you about a little bit more about how to be better about playing the game.
Now, talk about the different biomes. I saw some really cool biomes when he was running around. I saw like a toxic biome or something at one point.
Yes.
Now, you're a robot. Does the biological mechanic, does that affect you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so one of the reasons why you landed here in the first place is because it can sustain human life. The ultimate endgame objective is to create an outpost that can sustain human life. Now, in terms of the biomes, I originally created the environment for it, and it's a 6x6 square kilometer map. It's huge. It's got a lot of room for different types of resources, and we want the game to be mysterious and beautiful in a sense, so that when you play and explore, you kind of get excited when you find something new, and then you learn what that new thing does, and you know where to find it using common sense with biomes. There's going to be a lot more silica and various sodium resources that are closer to the water, and if you want iron and copper, things like that, you head for the mountains and where all the big rocks and things like that are. So we're very excited to share that environment and have players explore it, and we have a lot of opportunity to actually expand the environment if we wanted to in the future and do things like snow or ice melts or jungles and things like that. So it's pretty cool.
Now, what is the game taking place in like a sci-fi genre, like an alien planet, open up for you creatively when you're inventing these environments?
Yeah, so basically the backstory of the game is that you're essentially being sent out by this corporation in IVC, Interstellar Venture Corporation, to go to these various planets under the guise of creating a colony for humankind. but really what they're interested in is their own profit. So you're basically strip mining this planet. Earth has long since been industrialized, and there's not really any animals
Right.
left. So they're like, well, let's go over here and take what we can from here. And so the theme is very much like industrialization, taking this planet over. And these robots are essentially like, even though they're sentient, they're seen as basically like a slave workforce, right? So in a sense, the protagonist is these robots, and the antagonist is like the human masters that are sending them here to kind of be this labor force. And they're forcing them to pit them against each other, like basically their own kind, the other corporations that come and land to, because it's like a Wild West sort of scenario where anything goes. So you go and kill each other's bases and stuff like that to prevent your rival corporations from making a profit. So in a sense, the robots that are actually attacking you and trying to take your base are really the good guys, and you're the bad guy here. But we'll explore that more through the campaign and in future expansions.
So talk about some of the enemies. I see you mentioned space pirates. I've also seen some like alien spiders and like a rhinoceros type of thing or some big beast thing.
So there's a bunch of different native wildlife on the planet. None of them want you there. They all want you gone. And the various different. Oh, that's not going to be.
Yeah, that's not good right
a
there.
good time for him. Yeah.
He's going to want to run away from that.
Then we call that guy the Mauler. He packs a pretty punch, and you want to be a higher level before you can take guys like that on. So Jack, if you bring up the map really quick, you can see kind of I don't want to get you killed, but you can see kind of he's in the middle level zone right now.
Right.
In the middle of the map, you spawn in the upper right side which is kind of the low level zone, and then the lower left it gets to the high level zone. So with that increase in potential resources comes an increase in threat too.
Whoa!
Oh, there's the big daddy.
So
right
that's
there. So
that's an albino alpha right there.
That's an alpha albino Mauler. So that's
wow.
it's gonna be a bad time. Yeah.
He was doomed to fail. That was 2v1.
He was doomed. So yeah, touching on the types of zones, when you do explore, I mean, there are creatures with levels, and they kind of roam in packs, and there's cubs, and there's fully adults, and obviously the white mauler you saw was an albino alpha. So that you can tell by looking at them that you don't want to mess with certain ones, or you don't feel ready to at least,
So talk about like the map itself. You said it's a huge map. Is it the same map every time? Is it procedurally generated? Is it designed a specific way, or?
So it is not a generated map. It's a static world. It's a very large map that in time players are probably going to chart locations and things like that and share it with their communities and find kind of the best spots to build bases or locations that are more efficient than others. The thing about it is that the way we balance resources across the map encourage trading between players. So if they'll find iron in one spot, or they'll find some very rare resource in another, and then they won't have that on their side of the map, for example. So now they'll be more inclined to kind of do a little bit of bartering or trading. That doesn't always lead to just straight up PvP fights.
Right. See, that's the thing with like a lot of survival games that are just survival games. I hate when they have procedurally generated maps, because like I want to learn how to get farther, and when you put me in a different map, I have no idea where to go, where stuff is. And people say it's part of the fun. I'm like, I'm kind of frustrated because I got really far, and I need to find this resource. I don't know where it is. I'm going to die.
The systems that we have are complicated enough to learn without having to relearn the map every time.
To throw in a new location every single time you die. Speaking of death, like what are the penalties upon death? Do you have X amount of lives? Do you have to start over? How does that work?
Yeah, so if you die, you basically will be dropped back in a drop pod somewhere else on the planet. You might not be really near your base. But what could happen is since you're a robot, you can build extra empty chassis for yourself.
Okay.
So those would be stored back at your base as, so to speak, like extra lives. So if you're being raided, you can have plenty of extra lives back in your base, but once you run out of those, you have to spawn somewhere a little bit farther away. So it's going to take you some time to get home, and in the meantime, your enemies might have breached your defenses.
So it's not so much you have a character that dies and you lose everything. It's if you die, you have to get back to your base as fast as possible. Everything you've curated will be destroyed. So it's not like permadeath, you're dead, start over, try again.
Right. It's when you die, you do lose all the things that you were carrying.
Well,
but your base is
that
still
goes
there.
without saying.
So and all your drones are still working, and hopefully that you had some backup gear or something in your base. And if you really want to get your gear back from your body, you'll have to go out there and loot it, unless someone's taken it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the penalty for death isn't specifically that punishing. But if somebody comes in and raids and destroys your entire base, that's a different story.
Right. So it's, I'm guessing Unreal Engine?
Yes.
Because the game looks gorgeous. So talk about what that what Unreal has provided in terms of tech and support to help make this game a reality?
So we've actually incorporated a number of things tied with NVIDIA, specifically VXGI. Jack could probably show you some of the VXGI settings here that we have incorporated, and that basically is a new feature that allows textures and emissive materials to actually light the environment without actually placing physical lights in the game.
Oh wow!
So this is all actually lit. When he runs down, you'll be able to see the walls and things like that that are lit without actual lights being cast. So that saves on performance for us and allows us some cool next generation features that
you can see as he turns VXGI on how the lighting and reflections on the map, and that all comes from just completely dynamic. All just the textures and the emissive stuff in the world kind of lights the entire world. So everything just pops a lot more. It looks really, really, especially in a sci-fi game like ours, where everything's a little kind of glowy.
Yeah.
It just makes everything look really richer and more immersive.
Now, can you play the game in first person and in third person?
Yeah. So you can switch back to third person mode. The game isn't really a Twitch FPS, so we didn't see any trouble with adding a third-person mode from a balance perspective, and a lot of players kind of, I think, would prefer to see how their character is evolving in terms of all the armor and weapons and stuff that you're putting on. So, also, if you want to dance like Sai, you can do that.
Does he do the robot though? That's the question,
yes,
right?
He definitely should. Yeah.
He is a robot. So how do you guys like to play your game when you're actually like enjoying it and not like working on it?
Oh yeah. I personally, I challenge myself in terms of trying to build like the tallest base, right? What I'm trying to go for is like a 2-tiered turret-based defense system that will basically cover all angles of my base. That way I can farm resources without too much, without worrying about my bots dying to other players or anything like that. So when we're playing, when we do like these closed pre-alpha tests, I'll turtle up and then I'll immediately go for guns, and I'll have backup chassis, and I just go try to find Dan, for example, and take him out.
So it's interesting to see how different players kind of approach it, because some players really go from like an economy perspective. I really want to get to the point where I'm crafting and upgrading all my stuff, and other players are like, no, I just want to find somebody else and go kill them. Yeah.
So talk about your relationship with Tiny Build.
Tiny Build's been great. Tiny Build's our publisher. I think a lot of us are very, very veteran developers, so they're putting a lot of trust in us to kind of do things the way we know how to do it. And they have a lot of faith in our development process, and they are very hands-off. They pretty much let us develop things that the way that we want to. And when they have suggestions, that's all they are, they're suggestions. But a lot of times they're like, you know what? We take a step back and we're like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Maybe we should kind of go in this direction a little bit. So they're very supportive.
So talk about what your guy's doing right now. He was like pointing a gun at, like, is he building that or is he repairing it?
So he's welding it right now.
We have a frame
he's got a hand
system
welder equipped which welds things. So what you do is you build structures, you put the frames down, and then if you don't like where they were, you can kind of pick them back up and just get your resources back.
Yeah, traditional survival games, it was always kind of a pain, because then you'd have to plan your base, and then if you committed the resources, you've already built it. Those resources you can't get back unless you demolish it, and only a partial return. With our game, we have a frame system that allows you to plan the base and let your bots just build it for you. That way you can do the actual fun task of planning out and building your base with the frames, and if you change your mind, at no cost, you just take those frames back.
So your bot, you can either assign your bot to do this, or you can do, if you really want to be tedious, you can do it yourself.
Yes.
Sure. So you're giving the players the option to play how they want to play.
You could do everything by yourself. You don't have to build bots if you don't want to. In fact, that might be a good challenge for a lot of players that want to solo it through, Can
you talk about some of the, are there talents in the game? Is there a leveling system? How do you get that stuff unlocked besides building previous things?
So there's a general colony level that you progress by upgrading your command center. And that unlocks higher level structures. There's also a full RPG stats system. So as you kind of gain better gear, you can buff up some of your stats. Any sort of weapon damage stats, as well as armor stats, and economy stats. So how much you can hold, how much you can carry, how fast you can mine. How far away your resource sensors can reach to see what nearby resources there are. Your jump height, your run speed, all of these things are things that you can do as a bot. You can upgrade your legs so you can jump higher. or like jump jets or glide down off of a mesa or something like that. So there's a lot of progression that you can do personally as well as with your bots to go from kind of being a very similar just to a normal humanoid to something that is actually very, very powerful.
So when does the game come out? What platforms will it be on?
So we're in alpha right now. If you sign up on our website, outpostzerogame.com, you can join and try and get an alpha key. We'll be out in early access on Steam later this summer, and our full release is slated for later this year.
So your Xbox One and PS4?
We're definitely hoping to do that in the future, probably not until next year. But so we're starting off on Steam. We really want to build a loyal following. We really feel strongly about releasing this game and then supporting it heavily, adding a ton of content. And then once we get to the point where we feel like there's enough of a following, then we can port it to other consoles.
And you got to port it to Switch too, because everything has to be on Nintendo
Everything
Switch.
has to
Tiny
be on the
Build very
Switch,
much believes in Switch.
Tiny Build does.
It's probably going to happen if it does happen, yeah.
Awesome, guys. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Will. For more videos like this and everything else gaming related, stay tuned to Shacknews.com, Twitch TV/Shacknews here at PAX East 2018.